Welcome back to Hacker Hangouts. It is another Saturday morning, and I am pumped to be here with my friend Gatorbite, who we got into this great conversation last week after streaming. We were talking about privacy and what that means. But then he went on like a huge tangent, which was a glorious thing to listen to, of like this whole journey he went on, making him and his data like more private, his family's more private, talking about creating burner phones. And it was funny because when I first heard it, I was like, this is crazy. No normal person actually like goes through and creates burner phones for their family. And that sounds like a whole lot of work. And as he got into it, he started talking about how actually pretty easy it was, which was pretty freaking cool. So first, Gator, welcome back to the channel. Obviously, so happy that you're here. And let's first jump into like what does it actually mean to like be anonymous, to be invisible online?
So there are a lot of different definitions and degrees of this. And so if you're just trying to go by a pseudonym online, it's one deal. If you're trying to have a completely different identity online, it's another. And some people need to take that to different degrees because of their personal risk model, right? So to try to help frame the entire idea, if it's just you and I talking, whenever we've been doing things, planning for the darknet, we've only had our handles that we've been using for years on the Google Drive, right? And meeting up online. And there are other times where, hey, if I want to go talk to my doctor or if I want to talk to somebody else, especially these last 2 years, the need for an online identity has been even more because we weren't able to go see people. We had to go do it online. So how and where are you trying to protect yourself from, or protect yourself from what, when you're trying to be more private online or invisible online? And the steps have to be intentional to be able to segregate your data when it comes to, hey, is this real person or this pseudonym name connected with the real individual that has a mailing address, taxable information, et cetera, et cetera. So
I want to ask the question though, because you kind of said like the difference between having your real identity and a fake identity and pseudonym, like, and I feel like anytime I've typically heard having like a pseudonym, like again, I have my handle, it's Silk. At one point I wanted to combine that with my channel so it's there, it's not like a hidden one. And I think typically like a handle is like, sure, in the hacking world, like you have a handle for any number of reasons, but you're talking about not having a handle for let's say nefarious reasons or techno geek reasons or gaming reasons. You're saying like having a pseudonym for like you're having those separate for like general worldly thing, Amazon purchases and things like that.
Absolutely. So depending on your, yes. So you could go to Amazon, you could go to your gaming side, because whenever somebody tries to go through and dox somebody else or tries to find out who their identity is online and then spread it out to the world, it's only the people who have never prepared for that are really in a bad situation, because you have no idea where your information is online. So it comes down to how bad can that hurt you on a kickback? Whether somebody's doing whether somebody's going through and doing like a deep fake on you, which is, I don't think a deep fake of you and I, Silk, are going to affect as many people as people in Hollywood. So our threat model is going to be different on that versus maybe Gallery, because I mean his hair tossing with that one clip. I tell you, I mean it wouldn't be that hard to take that next step. So our threat models are all different. So for me, when you talk about deep fakes though, that seems like verging on the area of paranoia. Like, I'm not like, one, if someone wants to go and create a deep fake of me, like one, I would be flattered. Like I'm not that, but I'm not, that's not really part of my risk. That seems on verging of paranoia. So like, first, let's actually, because I don't want to go, we're going to meander with this conversation because there's so much to talk about. So first, let's talk about like, what is this conversation specifically when it comes to being invisible online? I think it's worth saying we're not talking about hands on keyboard, like hacking, like Parrot OS or anything like that, or any of the, I'm losing some of the like Kali or Black Arch or whatever else.
Yeah, Black Arch. There's actually one I'm forgetting right now, which is completely, maybe someone in chat can help me out.
Oh, are you talking about Tor? Or are you talking about Cubes?
There's one which is made specifically like the moment you boot it up, you're automatically over Tor, you're automatically over proxies, all your stuff is anonymous. We're not really talking about necessarily, though that part might come into it, is enigmatizing all your traffic over something like some sort of web proxy or Tor or something like that. We're talking about actually like living your life so that
Yes.
you're anonymous online. That stuff, you're not connecting your personal life with say your online identity, and that goes across the board for things like taxes and property registration and title insurance and all of the stuff which is public online. That's what the core of the conversation is. Is that
Absolutely.
right?
That's a good that's a good scoping of what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay.
So it'll be less of the tools, or less of the hey, here's how to go use this piece of software, and more, here are the practical steps, and here's what has or has not worked for me.
Yeah.
So
Squiddy and Digital got it. It was Tails. That was the one
Tails.
I was thinking of.
Absolutely, right? So I have a whole rant on Tails as well, but we'll leave that to later on in the conversation if we get to it. So the first thing, go ahead.
That's the what. Now let's probably talk about the why would you go about doing this? Like why care?
So in my use case, everybody has to be able to take a step back in their personal and or professional life and find out what their risk model is. And this is what a lot of people don't connect. There are so many things with risk management framework, or when you're at work having to find out, hey, if an attacker is going to come into my network, where are those juicy bits? We need to do the same thing for our personal lives too, to find out if you need to have this level of paranoia going on or not. In my past, and I can only talk to my past, which is I used to work for a company that was dealing with more of, we'll say, trade secrets, and go from there. So I was having to constantly watch my back for other people who were actively coming in and trying to copy our information, our product, and to be able to go from there. I work now someplace where it's open source, where I don't have to worry about that, which is fantastic. So my threat model and my risk model has changed from my last few employers, which is great, which means I can put on a different hat now and start looking at things differently. I also legitimately had an evil mother-in-law who was very vindictive. So I had to put that in my threat modeling to say, hey, if they know where we live, if we still have email access, if they have phone numbers, there are so many things when it gets to the whole stalker side of the house that this gets super scary about, to where you start to realize just a little information. And with open source intelligence gathering, or OSINT, it is easy for somebody to track you online. So just in like those two things, that's what helped start shaping why I was trying to be more private online. And I had been trying to do this by myself for years. And I would say the journey has been about 10 years, but it got pretty serious in the last 4 or 5, because I ended up finding a resource called Intel Techniques. So this guy, Michael Bazell, used to go through and work for the FBI using OSINT, open source intelligence gathering, to find people online because of them just sharing it or connecting handles with real names. And his job was finding these folks. He did that for so many years and then quit, moved into the private side, and he started teaching people how to protect themselves online. So he's got like books that are thick, like stupid thick. But I will tell you, the information is absolutely golden. And by the way, not sponsored. This is legitimately just amazing information that gets updated all the time. He also has a podcast that he updates with the weekly updates of saying, hey, if you're still trying to be private online, that thing that I told you about 3 weeks ago no longer works. Here's how you need to adjust. So,
okay. So like something which is so interesting here is you were talking about like the why. Like you do your own personal risk model, which is so funny to me because like I do them for a living for companies, and not often do I like look at my own life and be like, okay, what? And I feel like you go down a weird path when you do this, because I know when I do it for companies, I always laugh, like, because I've had to do one recently, and one of the questions I asked was like, okay, who had global pandemic zombie apocalypse inside their risk model? And, no one did that. Like, they talk about earthquakes and things like that, and you're like, global pandemic? No one had that on their bingo card. So I think there's like, you have to like it sounds like you came up with a list, and you had likely things. We'll say crazy mother-in-law. Like, I think we all have some of those stories, probably not as crazy as like yours, but we all have some of those we're worried about. And then it goes farther to like, we'll say I want us to use global pandemic as the crazy thing, but
Right. But it's not anymore.
it's not anymore. So like, we'll say like you go to the crazy like stalker, maybe things like that. And you then come up with a plan for each one of those things. And I find it interesting because like, I know as security hackers, you get in your own head, and I'm sure everyone who's in chat who's watching this, you get in your own head, and those crazy things start shifting. So I think you have to like, maybe you have a way of doing this. Like, how do you say like, no, okay, this is crazy, this is not. And I'll use the example for me. When I used my real name on the YouTube channel on Twitch, I was terrified to do that. And then I had a great conversation with Gowrie. He's like, What are you worried about? Like, no one cares. Like, you care more than anyone else. So, like, how do you say, like, this is crazy and this part isn't crazy?
So, scoping is just like what you were talking about for you doing with the companies. You have to scope your own life and say, what are you trying to protect yourself from? Is it literally the neighbor next door that's trying to crack your Wi-Fi? The kid down the street who's just trying to get some free Wi-Fi and maybe some prawns as well? Or are you looking at an evil mother-in-law? Are you looking at a competitor? Are you trying to protect from Big Brother or three-letter agencies or a nation state? But one thing that people miss is that it should come as no surprise that if a three-letter agency or a nation state or Big Brother wants to know about you, they've got more time, more money, and more other materials, resources to be able to find out more about you. So you have to scope of, I can't protect to infinity. It's not possible. You don't have the time, you don't have the money, you don't have the man hours to keep up with that. So knowing you're not going to protect yourself from big XYZ, now how do you reshape that? And that helps you get from the crazy paranoia to who is going to come after me and how. So we've got an immediate scope that way then.
Okay, so like, yeah, something like you said is like given enough time, money, resources, you can be found online. And I think I saw in chat someone said like there's going to be times where like you almost hamper yourself if you don't. I'll flip on over to me. If you don't make yourself public, like LinkedIn, I list my company. My company has my address and that things like that. Like I have to list my title and name. So is the way you do it is by you create your handle, your online persona, because I know the moment those two things get connected, it's relatively easy because there's certain pieces of information that are just out there. Like it's weird to me that anyone can know what my property taxes are. You can look it up online. You can see what my water bill is. You can get the account number for my water bill. Like that's all public, and it's really weird to me that some of that is so public. And yes, for chat, not a sponsor, actually a sponsor, not actually a sponsor. Garbage VPN, brought to you by Garbage VPN. Garbage in and garbage out. Brandon, like you have been making the funniest things. Who's calling me right now? No one needs to. Mom, you're calling me during stream, Mom. I'm not answering. Oh goodness.
Risk model.
But garbage V. Yeah, Mom. Risk model. You should be watching this, Mom. Oh goodness. But going back to it was like that. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. Check out the ads. They are absolutely freaking hilarious.
They're
it's
hilarious.
It's funny that this has become a thing. When you determine your risk model, you start going, okay, so you go down the stage of, okay, this is paranoia, this is not, knowing that you can't do everything. So what are the first steps you take from a technical perspective? Like how did you, I think actually when you went down this path, what was the trigger for you to start on this?
So having some creepy stalkers. In one case, it was mother-in-law. Another case, it was literal competitors that were called out that were coming and watching both house, going in and out of location. It was pretty freaky. So it's like, all right, this is an active, real threat that I've seen. So I need to protect myself from it, making sure I take steps that I'm not tipping my hand to the adversary. In this case, your first steps are, hey, you need a name, man. If you have no name, you don't have anything. So you need to go back online and...
Oh, it's not going to come through.
Oh,
hold on.
So
hold on. Here we go. I'm so happy, by the way. I bound this. This is now a thing. Here, I'm going to pop it up so we can actually see it. Yeah, here we go.
Yes.
I don't know why I'm so proud of this, but I agree with you, Digital. We do need another one, which is the "Play with Me,
Play
Baby"
with me,
from
baby.
War Games.
Absolutely.
The second War Games. Keep going though.
So you start with a handle, and anytime once you look for a handle, you should be looking online to see if anybody else has it, because you want to make it unique, or you want to make it so generic it's going to look like it's a bot account, right? So these are your two ways if you want to be unique or if you want to blend with the flow. And this is going to have a theme that we actually go to and talk about in the later on, to where if you just want to blend in with the rest of the data. But when it comes to privacy, there's a lot of different ones that are out there. When it comes to, let's start with the email address. And you could use a free service like Google, like Yahoo. Typically, if something is free, you're the product. You're being sold to somebody else. So depending on your threat model, you may just need a random VPN, the garbage VPN. You may need a random email address to be able to reach out and use certain services and contact somebody, or you may need to be more paranoid and go something that's going to be more private, to where if there's a warrant, then if you're a warrant, pretty much everybody's going to give everything up. The end. Okay. Mm-hmm. Who is holding that data? So like if you use Proton Mail, they're more privacy orientated. They do offer like PGP out the gate, which is great. And if you're emailing from Proton Mail to another Proton Mail, that's all encrypted. Kind of nice, because it's literally a free email account, but they're more privacy respecting. Cool. So if you get yourself a Proton Mail, there's like Tuta Mail. There's a handful of other ones as well.
Mm-hmm. But that's the main reason you're talking about these ones is mostly to keep like your email secure.
Right.
Now, I'm going to ask you this though. You're saying Gmail isn't secure?
So I'm saying that it's not private. Security versus privacy are two different things, right? So they could be keeping my email secure, but that doesn't mean that they're not scraping it for their data to sell off to XYZ. And if that's the case, if you're trying to protect yourself from Big Brother, depending on where you are in that scale, then maybe you don't want to use Gmail to say, hey, I've got this prostate thing I'm trying to look up that's not connected to my identity. And now if I'm logging into another Gmail from the same IP address at my home, then that could be correlated pretty easily. Or if you have a Facebook account on one and you don't have a Facebook account on another, hey, it's all still coming from the same IP address, unless you use a garbage VPN, then you can go through and start separating that information out.
Yeah, Brandon calls it the compartmentalizing data. The kicker here, though, is like you just said it though, is if you're a prostate thing, or we'll use like the example. Say like you're a lunar, you're just like super into balloons. That's it. Like you just love balloons.
99 love balloons.
If you love balloons and you don't want anyone to know about that, and you're like, okay, well, I'll use Proton Mail. The moment you use Google, though, that's still going to be associated with you. So you have to go away from Google, which I use DuckDuckGo. I love DuckDuckGo. Like, please, anyone in chat, I get it. Like, I know you love DuckDuckGo. Google is better. But Google is better. They have more money. It's better search results. So the question is then, is the only way, because you're in your risk model, you're talking about like, I'm not going to trust Google. I'm not going to trust Gmail. I'm not going to trust corporate America with any of my data. So this is the way I'm going to go with. Is that what you're saying?
So I'm saying, depending on your risk model, you may be going that direction. So, and in my use case, to be honest with you, Silk, Google has a place in my risk model to where there are services that I do use. I have gone through and tried to de-Googlefy my entire life. I'm still trying to get there, but the problem is there's a lot of things that Google does that open source can't do at this point, or doesn't do well. So finding out that balance of, I've done the de-Googled phone. I've got alternate operating systems running every place. I've bought other phones to flash the alternate OSs on. Hell, I even bought the PinePhone 64 just to say I'm just running a pure Linux phone. It's all open source, and there's not those trackers going back home. So depending on if you're just searching online versus if you're going to your point of the balloons, if you already know the sites that you want to go to instead of you just surfing Google for them, whole DNSSEC is a whole thing that we could talk about, but depends on how hardened you want to make your layers on if you're on a VPN, if you're off a VPN. If you're going to Starbucks or McDonald's or mom and pop free Wi-Fi down the street, depending on how private you need to be, you may not be wanting to do this at home, period. It depends on the sensitivity level of this. So That's on the. So we talked about emails. We talked about the other thing that I would say after you get your handle and your email, honestly, is you need a password manager because you're going to be going through and making accounts different places.
You also hit on this other topic, which I think it's worth sitting on for a little bit. And I don't know where you sit on this. So this is like one of those things. We're not in the same room, so it's not like we can discuss this beforehand, which is VPNs. You talked about like, okay, you're at McDonald's, you're at public Wi-Fi, you're at public mom and pops. Like, I have very strong opinions on VPNs and things like that. Like, do you think those help you remain private, anonymous online?
Okay,
it's totally entrapment because I'm ready for whatever you say to like jump on it.
So I will say VPNs have different purposes for different people. Some people want to watch their hentai on XYZ site. For me, I've always seen a VPN as I want to secure my
just drop that and move on.
Just keep on going, right? So I mean, I didn't think you want to go through, for my use case, I wanted to make sure that my data going from here to the cloud was somewhat private. So my ISP can't see what's going on there. If I'm out and about, I want to be able to turn on my VPN and get back to my home network setup. That's my use case for a VPN. And that means that if I turn that little guy on, if I've configured my network correctly, when I'm opening, for me, I open a certain browser, it then pivots every connection through that and then back down. And I can now go check like the speedtest.net or my IP leaker and see which IP address, if it's my home ISP or if it's my DigitalOcean or my Linode or my AWS droplet I'm pivoting through, to be able to say, hey, this information is coming from that droplet only. So a VPN is not going to save you like all the ads on YouTube say.
And that's the piece for me. It's like they're so like predatory too. Like if you watch some of these weird VPNs, they're always like the deep voice be like
come on, you can do it.
When the attackers come, they are going for your data, and their data, your credit cards, your ATM numbers. And I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't matter. It's all over SSL. Like in moreover, like just like Nord or any of these stupid VPNs that exist. Like again, I want to say I'll never sponsor them on this channel, but they offer me enough money, I will absolutely say, no, I'm just kidding. That's terrible. But no, like, right? So many of these, it's like, okay, why would you trust them over like over SSL? Like all of a sudden, like you're now going through your own, like their traffic. All your data is going through a centralized authority. That's the whole purpose of what you're trying to stop. Is you don't want to go through a centralized authority. So like what you described, I do think is the ideal situation for VPNs, is coming back home. And for anyone who's looking to like set up their own VPN, you can like WireGuard. Forget about OpenVPN. Forget about oh goodness, I'm losing my mind right now. OpenVPN and the stupid certificates and all dealing with all of that. WireGuard, so nice. You can run it in a Docker container. Like it's over UDP. It's connectionless. Oh my gosh, WireGuard plus Mosh is like the coolest things for me. Mosh is a way of running SSH over UDP, so it's connectionless. So your connection can flake out. WireGuard is fantastic for anyone who's never used it. Really easy to set up, fully open source. You can spin it up in a Docker container, open up a port, done. But like that's the purpose of a VPN, is coming back home, because the moment I come back home, I'm now going through a pie hole. I'm now, all my DNS is over. And that, unlike SSL and your bank, DNS is like the weird last bastion of like,
it is
stupidity online. Like again, I say stupidity, like people smarter than me have designed it, but it's still over plain text. You can leak so much information over DNS. So I think when we're coming to privacy, I know I told you I was going to be like ready to jump on this one.
This is all good.
But is DNS. So if you're running DNS in your own house, typically by default, your ISP is going, like your ISP is who you're using for DNS, which is just
give me your data.
Weird.
Yeah.
So DNS is one which most people don't realize, and I didn't realize it when I set up, and I was like, oh good, this is like a big one. What do you use for DNS? I use Cloudflare, like and mainly it's so easy to remember, 1.1.1.1 or 1.0.0.1, and then do what is it? DNS over HTTPS, DNS over SSL.
So
what do you use?
I've started dabbling. I have used Cloudflare in the past, and it's worked out pretty well for different blog sites and or for our our darknet contests and whatnot, I've actually put them as the tier 2. Number 1, I've gone through and done quad 9 because you can turn on DNSSEC right out the box, and then it works pretty well in my opinion. Cloudflare has actually got the awesome option to where if you're hosting or taking care of a router for like an organization or a church or whatever else, you can actually turn on like adult filters and a couple other things that help make sure that there aren't just rampant bots that can go through, that you're going to go visit sites. They actually black hole a bunch of stuff, which is kind of cool. So I have quad 9 as my default, and then Cloudflare is my backup because, hey, Cloudflare goes down often enough when there's big DDoS attacks to places. I don't want them to be number 1.
Makes sense.
But we're not talking about using Google at this point, because we were saying, hey, Google's already sucking so much information. They've got more than 60% of the ads online. So they know where you're at, even if you're not using them for a search engine. Let's just be frank, right?
That's actually, I'm gonna call out that point because that's a great point you made. Is it doesn't even matter if you use DuckDuckGo. Like as much as like I want to use it. The kicker is if any of those sites you just search, you wanted to look for your favorite balloon, the one you've been looking for, and you find that one and they run Google ads on that site, the whole purpose to using DuckDuckGo is out the window. So before we move off DNS though, what do you run for DNS in your house?
So I've been on a journey to try to understand exactly what's going on in my home network. And this has been a long-term journey because while I've done my A+, I've done my Linux Plus, I've got my RHCSA and CE, I didn't go through Linux Plus, or not Linux Plus, Networking Plus. So I'm having to go back and learn new things as I've gone along. And I started with something as simple as, and I suggest other people do this too, with Pi-hole, right? If you have a Raspberry Pi lying around, you can get one if you go to like the Pi Locator on Twitter, because they're kind of hard to get a hold of right now. If you go check out the Pi Locator, I've gotten 2 in the last month, and they're the specific high-end ones. But you can run Pi-hole on a Raspberry Pi 4, even with the 1 or 2 gig version, redirect your traffic through that instead, and then you're able to get so much data and see how many of your devices are connecting to some really weird places. You have the option to either block that or not. And I will say, when my wife is very patient with me, I love my significant other will let me go and play with things, and sometimes it doesn't work. And then she's like, hey, this thing. And I'm like, did you put in a ticket? No, I'll take care of that right now. Great. Thank you so much.
Wait, hold on. Did you just say you force your wife to create tickets for your home network?
I'm not crazy. I'm not having her do that. The kids will, but she won't. She's got priority.
Oh, it's terrible.
I'm completely joking, but the fact is that,
but kind of serious at the same time.
Hey, change control boards, man, they're important. We were trying to go through and watch Hulu. Hulu will not let you go through and watch things if you've got Pi-hole just on by default. So you have to do tweaking, and that's another thing that I want to drive home today, is that there is no set and forget anything for privacy. It is a constant job / battle / slog to go through and constantly make sure settings are tweaked correctly and that you're tuning things, not just with your firewall or your DNS or ad blocking, but with anything when it comes to privacy online. So Pi-hole is the first start if you can get started, because you're able to plug that into any mom and pop shop router underneath it, redirect your DNS, and it works really well. And you get so much more insight. Gets you a little bit.
I'm not sure if it's probably totally not going to work, and this is so risky. Live stream while sharing out mine. So yeah, this is my Pi-hole at home. Like again, live streaming, terrible idea. But this is mine at home, and it's like I set this up, and it's like 100,000 queries blocked. A third of my traffic is all being blocked. Like that is not it. That was surprising when I first saw that, where it's like half my traffic is all being blocked from this.
Absolutely. I'm seeing Smog asking about Little Snitch. Hey, if you're using Little Snitch, that means that you're probably running a Mac, which is great. There's also Open Snitch as well. So that's if you're doing a one machine that you want to check to see what it's reaching out to. I like it. Don't get me wrong. This is whole network. So that's why I like to see everything that's on the network is, hey, maybe you have an IoT device. And this gets to a whole nother conversation that I've been having with folks for the last 2 years on making sure that you've got your home network set up. I've got segregation, man, to making sure that things don't cross streams. And my IoT, I can see all the traffic that's going on there, and then see, hey, if I want this to be touching out there, or if I want to go see if it'll hook into like Home Assistant or such. Home Assistant, now that I actually have my own home that I can own and modify and do weird shit with, I'm excited to start doing that. But it's been this 2 or 3 year process of how can I understand my networking better to make sure I can start understanding what is touching out on the internet. Which brings me back to, so I start with Pi-hole. I have since then moved on to using a full-blown pfSense router instead. Mm-hmm. And then you're able to start using like Saracata. There's also a couple other IDS that you can stand up on there as well. I think Zeek is another one. There's also other like IDS systems that you can plug in line that you can then start looking at your traffic that's going on in your home. That's the next step. So the pfSense is what I'm currently running, and I absolutely love it. I bought dedicated hardware to do this, though, which is a step up in cost.
It's funny that you actually moved off Pi-hole to pfSense, because I actually moved off pfSense to Pi-hole. And it's mainly because I was getting really annoyed about running my own bind server and things like that. Like, one of the things you mentioned was that you go get a Raspberry Pi. I have a Raspberry Pi. I don't run anything on it. I run actually a backup DNS on it, weirdly enough, just in case everything goes down. But the best advice I would have for like anyone who wants to run any hacking tools, and I have, like, it's funny, I have a plan to do a video. I haven't done one yet, which is Docker. Like, just spin up a server running Docker, because all of these security tools all run Docker. By the way, Gator, still getting a little feedback. I'm not sure if it's coming through like an OBS or something like that. You don't need to look into it now. I think it's in chat, guys. Let me know if that's unbearable for you guys.
I will reposition this too.
Going into it though, like the thing which I've noticed within Pi-hole and things like that, all of it runs on Docker, and it's fantastic because you can just spin up tools fairly easily without actually going through Pi-holes. But you said that was first step. So you have control over DNS. We kind of went from this topic because I do want to pull it back to like online personas and things like that, because I know you have done a ton with that and there's some cool technology. But we've gotten to DNS. You said that was first step. What's the next step?
So knowing and segmenting your home network, right? So if we're talking about, and I actually saw a couple folks talking in the Hacker Hangout Discord saying, how can I see what's going on in my home network? That's the journey I've been doing for the last few years. So I've now gone through and set things up to where I've got Ubiquity gear that I can see where my traffic is going. So I went from an unmanaged switch to a managed switch. pfSense gives you great insight to set up VLANs, which is why when it went from Pi-hole to pfSense, I got a lot more insight into the rest of the network. So that's why I made that jump over. I went from a flat network as well to running 5 different VLANs, and like a handful of different SSIDs as well. So I wanted to Ubiquity gear. And I'll probably end up making a couple of videos on how I set this up for other folks who want to follow along. But I've got my home network with just my computers. Because, hey, those are my full-fledged machines. I've got my data on there. I can control when those are being updated. As a good sysadmin, you should be doing that, right? So I have a home LAN. I've got an IoT LAN. So I've got a couple smart light bulbs that I can change the colors on. Sweet. I've also got, and this is where I had to challenge my thinking on how I was going to classify things. Your phone should be considered an IoT as well, because you can't necessarily control when the patches and updates get pushed. So you have no idea when the software is being updated. So whether it's this, whether it's a Roku, whether it's a gaming station, whether it's Xbox, whatever else, right? Mm-hmm. Those should all be, in my opinion, put into an IoT VLAN.
This is where it starts sounding like crazy to me, because, like, don't get me wrong, I did all of this with the IoT devices on my home network, just because, like, it's just like one of those things we know there's no security when it comes to like IoT devices, and they all have to phone home. Like I have a Nest doorbell. I really like it, and mainly because not because I'm paranoid, just because then I always know when my new shipment of hardware comes in. They just get to see it at the door. But that's segmented off. Gary, though, brought up a good point. One, it's nice he's on here.
Hi, Gary.
Honestly, this all sounds impossible for the layman, just like the average consumer has no chance at the semblance of privacy. And
okay, I disagree. And there are different degrees to this, right? So just like to his point, I've gone through and set up VLANs because that was my use case. But if I was going to tell somebody else to start, you have a guest mode on every modern mom and pop access point out there. The easiest way for you to get more privacy is for you to go through and put your computers on the one side of that to where you can talk with those. Put your IoT devices on the guest side, because then you're still able to control it via your phone. It's still segmented from the rest of your network, and it's literally a checkbox that can go through. You may have another checkbox if you want to turn on client isolation. So much like nowadays, if you go to Starbucks or McDonald's or whatnot, if you try to do an Nmap of when you connect to the network, you're not automatically going to be able to see other people because they've segmented each IP address off from each other. So you're not able to see the other accounts.
So I'm gonna. Oh, go on. What I was going to mention is like Brandon said is I think pfSense could almost be approachable. I don't think it is. Like I think in my bubble when I set it up, I think it's great for people who are new to the field getting in because it allows them to tinker. But I'm wondering if like Ubiquity, which is what I use and I moved over to, but I don't even know if that's beginner friendly because I think like a technologist going in, but like my mom or father going in, like there's like no chance any of that's going to make sense for them. Like, is there a way? So Gator, question for you, because you have actually helped people become more private.
Right.
Is there a recommendation you give? Like, or do they have to have like a son or daughter who's like in IT? like in order to set up their network?
This is a great question. And I have helped coach a couple people to some resources. And then from there, they've taken off and they've gone from quote unquote layman to managing their own network. And they're putting whatever complexities that they do or don't want on there, depending on their risk model. So the whole point of pfSense, I tried to run pfSense in the past and I sucked hard at it. I got to the point where I broke my network. I was at work, unreachable by my wife. The internet was down. She and the kids are not happy. This is not okay. The significant other buy-in at that point was horrible, and I had to roll back to be able to make sure that things were stable so I could go say, go to this machine, unplug, plug back in, now it working. Versus, just grab the Chromebook SSH with, you don't have the key. Go to this machine, here's this login. Oh, you don't have the password. So the whole idea of how paranoid that you want to get with this and this significant other or the SO buy-in has weight to it. You have to be able to take that in consideration.
I just can't help but keep thinking every time you say this going, just have her fill out a ticket. Like you're a ticketing system. Yeah, that is not a way to get the buy-in of the significant other.
Right.
Let's move off the technology one because I think we can go down this crazy path and I think it's a lot of fun. But the one you introduced me to was where do you come in? And he just walks out of frame. I'm guessing something important happened. So I'm going to move it back to me. But I'll pose the question is what in chat? Okay, here we go. I'll jump back here then. So question for you, Gator, is we've talked about the technology that you've put in place. You have introduced me, like, I want to pull it back to like the social side of this, where it's like, okay, you don't need a handle online or things like that, but we know you have to interact with so many different companies. Like even like, hey, I'm selling something on Craigslist. How can I segment that information off temporarily? So like my email isn't going out to like all the different Craigslist people and all the different, Facebook groups or whatever. Like I don't have a Facebook, but like the idea is any of these people, like how do you segment that data off? Like what do you do for that? Your mic is muted.
So I know that there are questions in chat on, hey, how can we get started with some of these technologies? I will be dropping links for Silk to be able to put in and also be doing a follow-up post on the resources that we're talking about. I'm going to post this real quick in the chat with the pfSense checking out this channel called Lawrence Systems. He's the resource that I said to reference other people to, and they're able to get up and running very quickly with pfSense, including deep diving into VLANs, setting that up with Ubiquity. So I've got that both pfSense and Ubiquity. That gives me the ultimate insight into my network. I can geek out about these things for hours. So instead of taking this time to go through and do that, I'll make a separate video, and or if you have questions on it specifically, hit me up. Yep. To answer your
Squiddy, there's a link in Discord in this video description of this video. So you can go ahead and jump into Discord. I guess at this point, probably a good segment. We spun up a Discord channel. So like when I put out the thumbnail for this one, I got feedback, I got titles, but then we're also there for any conversations, and it helps these topics and the conversations you bring up help drive the topics of the channel. So please join the Discord. I'd love to see you on there. It's not crazy active, but we are getting more active and we're getting larger. So please join.
Absolutely. So I've also just posted that into the Discord then too in the general chat. So Piehole and the Lawrence Systems are the YouTube channel to check out for those two. So to go back to your question on how do you go through and separate your online identities? For me, there is much like when you're talking about work from home as well, you need to be able to have separate areas and or separate things so your brain understands I am going through and doing this in this area and I'm going and doing that in that area. So for me personally, when I'm using Google services and I'm connected to my Gator account, I am using Chrome because when we set things up, we're using a lot of Google Chrome or a lot of Chrome services like the G Suite. And at that time when we started doing like Darknet, there wasn't anybody else doing that. And now there are some people who are doing it. They're doing it okay, but they're not as good as Google. So finding out what your pain level is on collaboration versus if you're just doing this yourself also comes into how you want to do something online. Because if the community is not there, it's going to be harder for that adoption to happen. So
there's a really cool feature actually within Chrome, which I think you actually were about to mention, which is you can do different profiles within Chrome. So historically you had to use two separate browsers. Now you can have they treat them like completely separate browsers between the two, which is really nice, just setting up different profiles.
Absolutely.
The question I had was, though, with Craigslist, you introduced me to a really cool tool, which again, not a sponsor or anything like that, but like was called MySudo, which was really interesting. You introduced that for me at DEF CON handing out. Can you talk through a little? Do you still use that?
Oh, I use it, buddy. I use it still so much. So it used to be called MySudo, and it was a place where you could go through, and I'll drop links to this too, because this has been fantastic. When we were talking about setting up identity, literally I was going to say handle, email, password manager, and then the fourth, which is as far as I got at like 2:00 this morning, which was a virtual number. Because if you have a physical number, it is way, way too easy using OSINT tools to actually get the location of that real phone number. If you use a voice over IP number, then it gets a lot more mucky on where your actual location is. So if you're concerned about stalkers, or if you want to sign up for some random site because of rewards, use a virtual phone number. If you're not worried about Google, use Google Voice. It is so simple for you to be able to spin up a number on that right now, and then you have a call through. It works great. I've been using MySudo since 2018, and I got in on the early beta and then have continued paying for that. And I'm one of those crazy loons who's paying for the high-end tier of this. So I've got 10 different phone numbers. So I've got different IDs, different online identities connected with each one of these. One can be for my Gator Byte. So I've given you that number to where, hey, if somebody wants to contact me, you can get me there. The cool thing that Sudo or MySudo does is that it gives you that virtual number. You can do calling back and forth between different Sudos for free. If you go outside of Sudo, then it's going to cost you a little bit of money. I tried the other burner apps. So MySudo works really well. It also gives you an email, and it can give you text messaging as well. So the only issue that you start finding online is when you start doing virtual phone numbers, some sites won't allow you to go through and sign up for it if it's a virtual number only. If you and I want to call and talk to each other or text, that's just fine. But so many places want a real phone number now. And if you're trying to get around that by creating your identities online, the best thing is to go grab a Mint Mobile card. Mint Mobile is actually a NVNO of T-Mobile, and they give you a real phone number. So you get the trial card that you can get for 99 cents at Best Buy, or 99 cents on Amazon, and like a few dollars at Best Buy. And you get 1 week, so 7 days of like 100 megabytes, 100 talking minutes, 100 text messages to see if it works in your area. You get 2 of these SIM cards per of these packages, and you pop that into an unlocked phone. So in this case, if you have an iPhone, most likely you're going to be on you can have every carrier on there. Great. There are some phones that won't allow you to use like T-Mobile. So otherwise, go down to the store, pay for cash your T-Mobile burner phone, the little candy bar or whatever else. You can get something stupid simple, or you could get a very cheap Android. I mean, Android with spyware is only like $30, man. So how important is your privacy?
That one seems like a verge on paranoia for me, where it's like, okay, go grab burner phones, go get Mint Mobile. Like, it's not like important enough for me to do that part, but I do love the MySudo, where you can have, every time you spin up an account, it gives you like, here's your fake email, here's your phone number, and it all forwards to your main phone and text message. One thing, Brandon, you mentioned in chat was using it for two-factor. This is one of those things, and again, not going down like a weird hacker rabbit hole for whatnot, is two-factor on a phone is next to worthless. And I say that mainly because there's so many vulnerabilities for SIM hijacking. Pretty much the entire security of your two-factor is based on another company holding your two-factor. Like, because your phone can be transferred for any number of reasons, even by mistake sometimes, and those two factors follow the number. Versus if you have, sorry, the feedback's a little hard right now. Versus if you have it as a software device on your phone or a software token, that's much better. Even the push notifications and whatnot through like some of the news services are fantastic. But phones, for two-factor, not as much.
I have to tend to agree with you, especially if you're trying to use two-factor and using the MySudo app or any other virtual app. A lot of folks just straight up block it. You have to use an actual number. So that's why I'm saying go, if you're trying to set up your account for the first time, including if you wanted to do that Meta account or Facebook, to where you could go through and go grab a Mint Mobile card, set up your account. If you put a two-factor authentication on it, whether it's via an app like Authy or whatever else, or if you get yourself a YubiKey as well for that second factor authentication, and then you lose the phone number after 7 days, Facebook never asks, or up to this point has never asked you to re-identify yourself because you hooked a real number in the beginning of the account. So I have buddies like Ginger, who's gone through and set up a Oculus 2 with the Facebook account on a pseudo name, or I should say not pseudo name, a Mint Mobile name, lost the number, and still is able to play because he had this other authentication set up. It's not a bot account because he's still using it for other purposes and he's not posting spam. So take that for what it's worth. That's a real practical application to where you will be blocked actively in some areas. So one piece of software is not going to give you the solution to everything that you're looking for.
The other way I've done it in the past, and again, you're right, Brandon. Some of those some of the institutions still force you to use phone number two-factor. I actually think of a few that use it, which I'm forced to. The other way I've done it is there's some really cool GitHub open source projects which will wrap into Twilio, which is really cool. So you can just pull a number, it costs like $1 a month, and then whatever text messaging you got. Gator, I'm still getting my own voice in my headphones, so I don't know if there's a way of stopping that.
Hang on a second. Let me try something.
As much
here.
fun as it is to hear my own voice. Yeah, there you go. So okay, we've talked about a few things. There's actually a number. There's actually the one I want to end on, which I think is for me is one of the more interesting. We've talked again. We can go down any one of these rabbit holes of why and how, but the one I want to talk about is your family. Now, the piece of this is my kids are much younger and they don't have email address. They don't have social media accounts. At one point, though, they're gonna have that, and this is the piece where I go, there's so much to piece out here, because one, I do feel like as kids, you want them to have the right to privacy. Just the fact that, and again, me and Gowrie went back and forth, is have they ever had privacy? At least we had an opinion. They might never even have it.
Right.
But what can you do? What, again, for anyone who has kids or knows someone who has kids, what can you do early on for your kids so that they can be more private? Are you teaching them to have a handle? Are you giving them a number? Are you giving them an email? What are you doing to help protect them so that they know how to be safer online?
So these are great points, and this actually leads on to something else that Michael Bizzell goes over in his podcast and on his book as well, to where you need to plant your flag. I hate Facebook. But what I have learned over time is that if you don't go and own your real name at Facebook, somebody else could. And is that going to damage your brand sometime in the future? When we're talking about branding, we're not even talking about just business. Your personal, yourself, is it going to damage your reputation or whatnot? So my suggestion is you set up a couple accounts. Again, password managers are great for this then, because you don't have to remember the passwords for these. You set yourself up a personal email at their name. And then for me and what I've done with my kids, because, hey, we're jumping online, we're playing, because this last couple of years we've had to be so much more shelter in place, we've created online handles for each of them as well. So they can go on to like Fortnite and go play, and they're playing with family members, they're playing with trusted individuals, but it's not just their real name out there for everyone to see. Sometimes I give them the opportunity to say, hey, why don't you create one? And we'll go by that handle for a while. Or I just go, okay, if you're small enough that you can't just pseudo randomly make yourself up your own nickname, I'm going to assign one to you. And then you can go through and play that until whatever point in time that you want to change your handle. And that's not an issue. So I have the real name, so then nobody else goes through and claims it. They're not putting very much traffic to that. And anything like when they've signed up and played for like Fortnite versus if they've gone through and signed up for a Cybrary or Hack the Box or whatever else, they are using that handle account. So they've got some of that pseudo-anonymous start to where they can start exploring online without having their name directly connected to it from the beginning.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned with emails, like a trick I've used for a long time was I purchased a domain, like a long time ago. I own a bunch of domains, but I just actually set it up with just a giant catch-all. So I have my main email, but anything I put in front and to the left of the @ sign is going to come to me. So one of the things, if I buy something at Best Buy, it's Best Buy at my domain. And what's really weird, I didn't expect this to happen, but because it's been doing it for 15 years, is all of a sudden when you get like donate to the Republican Party or whatever it is from like the Best Buy account, you're like, oh yeah, they were hacked. Like, and it's really interesting.
Or they sold your data.
Or they sold your data. And that's what's really interesting. Or like, hey, donate to the Democratic Party or whatever it is. Donate to the Green Party. I don't know, whatever party you're in.
The Pirate Party too. Don't forget those guys over in Europe, right?
Party. But what's so interesting to me is like it ended up being like an early indicator, and this was like the first version I started doing for like Project Mariana and a lot of the dark web breach stuff, is just creating hundreds upon hundreds of accounts at all these different places as early breach indicators. So like that was another like weird trick that I've come across. Do you do something like that for your email?
So in some areas, yes, I need to be doing that better. And the whole idea about planting your flag, and much like if you're setting up a Windows domain, setting up that fake account that has admin privileges that shouldn't be able to get gotten to, and then all of a sudden they've cracked the password or they're now into it. Having those early indicators are important. So yes, in some areas I have. There is much more you can do, because when you're trying to go private online, this is not I'm going to do this in a weekend deal. It takes a while. You got to pace yourself. And that's where with these other links that I've dropped at from Intel Techniques, he says, hey, here's the data removal guide. Here's how to get the data that they currently have on you. So the data request guide. I live in California. I'm okay to disclose that. I have the ability to use the California Consumer Protection Act to find out how my data has been sold and given to other people. So I like to go through and go to my Google account, find out what information they have, erase it and say, okay, I haven't looked at this in X amount of years. They've seen every single time I go do a grocery run or a donut run or go to the Midwest or whatever else. If I'm able to access that information, depending on how strong your passwords are, then somebody else could access that as well if you don't turn on two-factor or such. So not only what information does X party have, what happens if somebody got access to your account? I helped somebody in this last couple of years to where they had, we'll say, some slick pics leak online because they didn't go through and have a good enough password. And then they were being blackmailed. And it's like, hey, so what's Gowry's thing? You can't be blackmailed if you're proud of it.
You cannot be blackmailed if you're proud of it.
Right. The problem is this individual was not proud of it. And they were threatening to go share this on all their social medias. So making sure that you actually have your recovery email set up and a second or third account connected to whatever accounts is important, because if you lose access to your email, especially Gmail, where do you go?
Well, especially like it's the interface to the world. Like, again, they now support SSO to all the other services. So that when you do have to protect something, which is interesting on that one too, is like the ways to recover accounts change over time.
Yes.
Like, most people didn't realize this. Is like, I did the video on my channel, recovering Noah Keegan's, his email account. And he's like, I have all these things on there, but eventually you go, I don't know that. I don't know that. Then it asks, okay, what is the security question and an old password? And it was because he set up his account so long ago, those recovery things still exist, and you have to remove those from your account. So even if you do all the things right, you're now relying on this other company. And this is where it's like, you're right. Email protection is a big one. But the one I'm going to recommend, though, if you don't want your juicy bits online, don't take pictures of your juicy bits and put them on the cloud. Like,
yes. It's easy. Don't do it.
It's like, I feel like the one guy who just has like the hands out, just like duh. Just don't do it. Like, I understand, like, that's a risky thing, but someone's like, well, I shouldn't be worried about my privacy. I get it. Like, this is a really weird rant I'm on, but like, that one just seems like one of those things of like, what is the easiest again, if you're proud of it, go for it. But like, that's the one where it's like, you trust whoever your data provider is and everyone who works there, and any minimum wage employee. Like, this is the thing which is going to destroy privacy, is that at one point the server room needs to get cleaned. It gets cleaned by a janitorial service that is not owned by the company, typically. That's contracted out. And if you go to any one of the cleaning people and you pay them $10,000 to plug a USB drive into a single server, there is a strong possibility we'll do this. This is a really weird rant. But you're trusting
it's valid.
Everyone, anyone, and most likely they're getting paid minimum wage. Like, of course they're going to do it. It's not a question of it's a question of how much money it would take for them to do it. I'm done ranting. I'm good.
No, this is good. So the evil maid attack is classic. So how many people are actually having people come in and clean their house versus they're at your office? How much data are you keeping at the office? And then the other thing is, to be honest with you, if we're going down the rabbit trail of online accounts, how much are you protecting your phones too, right? Some people don't want to have to be able to type in a password or pin or swipe. And I will say, I love my parents to death. I finally got them to finally put some security onto their phone versus, we're just going to keep it open. And this is to your point on when you're talking about kids. If my wife and I were to get hurt and we're incapacitated for whatever reason, can the kid pick up a cell phone and call 911 or a family member? And the question,
a good point,
right?
That's a great point.
So there's always a flip to this, to where, okay, if they're 6 or older, most of the time you can teach them how to type in a PIN code. If you can type in a PIN code, I've also gone through and set things up so far as having my sudo set up on an iPad or the old school Apple Touch, the touchscreen one, to where that's the house phone. They can call out and talk to grandma, grandpa, or emergency services or whatever else, to where they have a passcode they can get into, and there's a dedicated device for that. Because, I mean, let's be honest with you, who has landlines anymore?
That's kind of terrifying. Like, legitimately, this is like such a weird topic, because it's not often I come on these streams and go like I have never thought of the fact that if, again, my kids are young enough, so like they wouldn't, even if there was a house phone, like they need to teach them at one point, like they're young, but at one point, like they're at that age where they don't have their own phone and are incapable of unlocking yours. That is a really weird point. Do we need, maybe I need the panic button. I'm so happy of this. I'm going to just keep pushing it throughout.
So to your point, for our use case, the risk model for us is we had earthquakes, man. A couple years ago, there were some really bad earthquakes in California. So if we were to be trapped underneath XYZ, that's a risk model that I had to now say, oh crap, just like the pandemic. I may have a go bag in the car just in case the car breaks down with some tools that I can be able to fix some things on the side of the road. Great, you can be prepared for only so much. When it comes to risk modeling, you have to be able to constantly add and change and tweak that. So in my use case, when there was earthquakes in California, now I need to look at how can I make sure that the infrastructure is going to stay up in case somebody needs to call out. So if the Wi-Fi is down, that iPad Touch or the iPod's not going to work. what's your next solution, and continuing to go from there.
And this goes probably full circle back to risk profile, is thinking
Yep.
back, what are the risks? What are you looking to defend yourself against? What are the solutions you're putting in place to help mitigate those risks, knowing that it's a mitigation. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a full plan, but how do I mitigate those risks? And then
Absolutely.
rinse and repeat.
Yep.
I think this is the spot, because there's so much we could talk about. We really could talk about this one for a very long time.
A few more hours, to be honest with you. So.
Yeah, especially, I mean, every one of these topics, I think we could drill down into, whether it's technology or like your risk model. So we're going to end here, and it's not a great place to end, but what is your parting thoughts of like probably like the last piece you're going to throw on out?
So privacy it can be hard, and it's not meant for everybody to the paranoia level that's what necessarily your neighbors or what yours and mine are, Silk, because everybody has to do their own homework. That's hard, because if you don't do your own homework, you don't know where you need to be at the scale. It's not a drop-in replacement either. You can't just set and forget. This is active. So with that, make sure that you're telling the people that you love them too, because you never know how long you're going to be around. That's a whole nother subject as well, to making sure that you've got things in place to where if you're going to go a little bit more paranoid, that your significant others can get into your stuff. Because you could have somebody pass away and it'd be so locked down and so secure, your family can't get into it. So that's another talk for another day. But hey, go make sure to go love your hacker family.
I feel less paranoid after having this conversation. I thought I was on a level of paranoia, but it's just great meeting people just a touch more paranoid than you are. It's good. So much. This is fun. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you got something out of it. I much appreciate seeing you all this weekend. Thanks for watching, and hack on.